kids, I am Priyanka and I'm back again with my new chapter, The Man Who Planted Trees. About 40 years ago, I went on a long hike, though hill absolutely unknown to tourists. In that very old region where the Alps penetrate into Provence, it consisted of barren and monotonous land. Nothing grew that except wild lavenders. I was crossing this country as its widest part, and after walking for 3 days, I found myself in most complete dissolution. I was camped next to an abandoned village. I had used the last of water my water the day before I needed to find more. The ruined houses of villagers made me think that there must be one time have been a spring or a well there. There was indeed a spring, but it was dried. All life has disappeared. It was beautiful June day with plenty of sun, but there were no shelters land. High up in the sky, the wind whistled continuously. Its sound was like that of a wild beast disturbed during its meal. I had to move my camp after 5 hours of walking. I still hadn't found water, and nothing gave me a hope to find any. Everywhere there was a same dryness, the same stiff, woody plants. I thought I saw a distance the shadow of a figure. On a chance I headed towards it. I was a shepherd. It was a shepherd. Tiny lamb or so were resting near him on the scorching ground. He gave me a drink, and a little later he led me to his shepherd cottage. He shared his soup with me. He had been agreed immediately that I would pass the night there, the closest village being there more than a day and a half farther on. There are 4 or 5 villages dispersed far from one another on the flanks of the hills in the area. They are inhabited by woodcutter who makes charcoal. The shepherd took out a bag and poured a pile of acorns out into the table. He began examining them one after another with a great deal of attention, separating the good ones from the bad. When he had before him 100 perfect acorns, he stopped, and when he went to bed, the company of this man brought me a feeling of peace. He gave me the one impression that nothing could disturb him. I was introduced, and I wanted to find out about more about this man. Before going out of the next day, he soaked in the bucket of water the acorns that had been so carefully chosen and counted. He carried in an iron rod too as walking stick. He invited me to come along with me. Having arrived at the place he had been heading for, he began to pound his iron rod into the ground. This made a hole in which he placed the acorns and covered from the hole again. He was planting oak tree. In this way he planted 100 acorns with great care. He told me that for 3 years now we had been planting trees in the solitary way. We had planted 100,000 of these. 100,000, 20,000 has come up. It was this moment that I began to wonder about his age. He was clearly more than 50, 55, he told me. His name was Elzerad Beaufort. He had owned a farm in the plains where he lived most of his life. He had lost his only son and then his wife. He had retired into the solitude where he took pleasures in living slowly with his flock of sheep and his dog. He had concluded that his country was dying for lack of trees. He added that, having nothing more important to do, he had resolved to remedy of the situation. We planted the next day. The next year the war came, in which I engaged for 5 years. With the war behind me, I had a great desire to breathe a little pure air and set out again along the trail through the desired country. The land had not changed ever since the day before. I have been thinking about the shepherd who planted trees. 10,000 oak, I had said to myself, must really taken up a lot of space. When I met Elzard this time, I found that the war had not disturbed him at all. He had continued with all his planting, and an oak of 1910 were now 10 years old and were taller than me, and then him. The scene was impressive. I was actually speechless, and we passed the whole day in the silence walking through its forest. It was in three sections, 11 kilometers long overall, and in the widest point, 3 kilometers. When I considered that this had all sprung from the hands and from the soul of this one man without technical aid, it struck me that men could be effective as God in domains other than destruction. And that was all about this chapter. Thank you.